Cool. All right. Good conversation so far. A lot of the things you just heard be repeated in my presentation. I want to start by introducing myself. I'm Cedric Bowler. I'm a solution architect at AWS based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Gen AI has been a technical buzzword for probably at least the last 2 years. It's gained a lot of momentum. So I'm going to spend a little time today discussing our view of Gen AI on AWS platform, discussing some security considerations and best practices. And so we only have 20 minutes today. So if you like a deeper conversation, just let myself or Ron know, and we'll make sure we set that up for you. So just a quick overview of the agenda. We're going to hit on the AWS Gen AI stack and why that's important and how protection differs across the stack. Protecting your Gen AI workloads, we'll talk about some best practices, and then we'll wrap things up discussing benefits of Gen AI on AWS. So diving right in, what we're really starting to see from an industry trends is security remains a high priority for most companies, as well as security for Gen AI starting to rise along with the use cases for Gen AI in each company. So companies are really starting to see the importance of securing the data privacy, and compliance when it comes to Gen AI applications. And we're going to hit on all those topics. So hopefully you've seen this slide before, or some representation of it. Here's a representation of the Gen AI stack on AWS. So we'll start from the bottom and work our way up. So we believe in giving choice at Amazon. The bottom layer is really the infrastructure and services that you need to train your own models if they're not one strong enough or tailored to your use case, and the compute to process all of that data. In the middle, we have Amazon Bedrock, which is our tool that's leveraged to build applications. And this tool is starting to really mature. We've got a function called knowledge bases that gives you a RAG built into Bedrock. And then on top of that, we've got ready to use applications. And that's really wrapped around Amazon Q, where it's ready to go and you plug in your data and don't have as much choice. The LLM is already pre-selected for you there, but it's ready to go application, and it's a lot less security concerns when you think about managing. And we'll talk about that later in the slides. So protecting your cloud environment and Gen AI workloads. So really, what exactly do you need to protect when you think about it? I think as mentioned on the previous presentation, you need to protect all of your data in your cloud workloads, regardless if it's Gen AI or any other application. But then you start and those protection mechanisms are very much the same. But then you get to slide into protecting the data that you maybe using from other applications or solely for the Gen AI application. And going back, if you reference the AWS kind of slide that we talked about, the different stacks of Gen AI, as you go from left to right, you'll see when you're managing the infrastructure or you have a lot more customer responsibility. So you're responsible for client-side encryption, making sure your network traffic, the operating system, the platform, the customer data, all of that secure. As you move further to the right, you'll see the managed services takes care of a lot of those built-in functionality for server-side encryption, network encryption. All those things are done by us through our services at AWS, and your responsibility is mainly around securing your data. So that could be data masking, that can be encryption, it can be a number of mechanisms that you can leverage to secure your data on our platform. And more of those services are starting to be built into our Gen AI solutions today. We believe at AWS in defense in depth when it comes to security, and we apply those same principles to Gen AI. I won't go through all of these, but a couple that you should be aware of when you think about your data is making sure that you implement a least privilege strategy when it comes to Gen AI. So applications are purposely built for for business functions and your business teams, and you're only giving access to those who need those access to that data or that function. And even on the creation side of the Gen AI solution, limiting the who can change what LLMs you access or the data that's been represented there, and really making sure that only people who need access have access. Another function here is data redaction of sensitive data. And in Bedrock, we have some guardrails that are built in to detect sensitive data and redact that data from any of your responses. And we also have services like Amazon Macy and Comprehend that will detect sensitive data and mask that data for you. And you see a lot of guardrails here. Are we saying that you should use all of these guardrails all the time? No. But we are saying you should understand your application and your data sensitivity, understand the options for defense, the depth and defense that you have at your leverage, and use them as building blocks when appropriate for your different applications. Just a marketing slide here on Bedrock, and security is built into it. So Bedrock is secure by nature. Your customer data is not used to train our native models or any of the third party models that we leverage or allow you to leverage. Your data is always encrypted at rest and in transit by default, and we allow you to integrate into our identity and access management services to control the inferences, allow or deny access to specific models, and enable console access to the Bedrock service. Getting into compliance. So some of the things we've seen, and as I work with customers around Gen AI compliance considerations, the big three are hallucinations, data privacy, and quality control. And hallucinations are the most obvious and currently the biggest challenge for when using Gen AI, especially when it comes to use cases where you have compliance standards. LLMs have a lot of features that are built in to help manage hallucinations today, but they don't eliminate them entirely. So another mechanism you can use here is to prompt the Gen AI application that you have for source data, and basically have that source as a reference so you know where the data came from, and it reduces if there is any hallucination, you can be able to cite that source. The next one there, consideration is data privacy. There are tools such as Macy that I mentioned before that can be used to mask sensitive data. But when you're building your Gen AI solution, just like you will any other application in your portfolio, you want to ask yourself the question around why is the data required? So don't put unnecessary data in your Gen AI solution. Is it lawful to leverage the data outside of its original intent? Most of the data that customers are using in Gen AI is coming from some other application, some other business function, and you're using that data for Gen AI purposes. But first question, is it lawful to use that data? And then if you're going to use the data, if it's required, how do you mitigate the security risk? And then lastly, how will you limit unnecessary processing of that data? And for the last topic here, quality control. When it comes to quality control, this is still very much a human in the loop activity. Our Gen AI solutions, such as Bedrock, has a feature that allows you to evaluate the responses given from Gen AI, but that evaluation is still very much human driven, where you give semantics to the responses that you get from the model. So the quality control today for any Gen AI solution is still very much a human in the loop process, and that's something that you want to keep in that process for now, just to make sure the quality of your applications are just up to par. Responsible use of Gen AI. So here's some pillars, and at the bottom here that cover governance and compliance, your legal, privacy, risk, controls. We really believe that these 5 pillars should be the basis as you're starting to drive out Gen AI use cases in your in your corporation that you consider these. And the first one is fostering responsible Gen AI. And really that's making sure that there's fairness, there's no biasness in your responses, that you have good governance and privacy policies that are established, and then making sure that it's not offensive to different cultures and demographics. The next one there is tackling toxicity. You can train your models, or you can put rules in place to rule out any rude or disrespectful responses. And then protecting privacy again, you can leverage different mechanisms such as Macy, or putting in rules that prevent exposure of sensitive information, trade secrets, or IP. And the best protection there is not to put the data in your model if it's not needed. The last two here are making sure that you can trace where you and audit where the data is coming from, the source of the data, and who's using it. And then staying responsible. So to continuing to mature your process, apply your lessons learned, educate your organization, and in keeping least privilege access to your Gen AI applications. I'm seeing that a lot of customers are starting with chatbots for Gen AI for pretty much the whole organization. And the direction that I've been giving my customers is that sounds good for open corporate data, but as you start to move into different business functions, make sure that you start to lock down those applications just to the users who need access to that data. And as I mentioned, our Gen AI services have security built into them. We take a layered approach, and we're continuing to build out more and more security features, audit features, features that allow you to go back and even put semantics to your responses as you go through and to figure out which models are more relevant to your use cases. And the speed to doing that, based on us taking the heavy lifting and burden of building those things out for you, make extend itself on our platform. So I just had a few slides. That was the end. Any questions, comments?